I had this aha moment a few months ago. I paused the show last summer with an idea to find a producer that could help me shape it to match the quality and style I could see in my mind. Hey, Nick, this is when you can cut in and say hi to everyone.
Hey. Hey, everybody.
So that's Nick Jaworski at Podcast Monster. He's the production magic here everywhere on the show. Okay, so this aha moment. Nick and I were on a Skype meeting, talking about the show and the big stories of my guest, and he was asking me about why I created the show, how I do the interviews, and so on. When I said that I only do interviews in person now versus remote like I used to do in the beginning, as in I literally get on a plane, train, or automobile to go where my guest is, he was stunned. I guess not many others are on this big adventure of traveling around the US to meet these amazing people. But the interviews and experiences are so much better. And it's a big old adventure for me. Then he said, what about the meta theme of this show? Isn't this show about your big story too? Duh. The funny thing is, I always thought it was. I just never shared much about it in the show. This season does just that. It captures my adventure of connecting with these inspiring people, getting into their world, literally in their homes, in their office, in their cars, or even on a farm. And you'll get to hear me creating my story in the process. I'll leave the rest of the production magic details like the music and the editing styles that we've added for you to discover as you listen. Oh, except for two semi-important details. My Big Story is now available every other Tuesday and is being released in seasons. This current season will run through June. The episodes don't stop at the podcast, though. There's also behind-the-scenes fun I'll be sharing from each episode, like pictures on the road and with every guest, and even sometimes with my Uber driver. Now that's a big story, but you're gonna have to wait for that episode. Come join me on Instagram at @MeChristopher to see all those goodies and to be part of my community of dreamers and doers. And head over to mybigstory.show for details about each episode. Okay, one last plug. I'm also sharing links to each episode and other super cool inspiration goodies in my weekly email, Awesome Finds. Head over to ChristopherSwan.info to subscribe. Okay, are you ready? Let's do this. Here's season 2 of My Big Story, and I'm Christopher Swan. Is it weird or odd or...
It's very weird.
To look back at those old pictures?
I don't like to share them very often.
What was that look? What were you doing there?
Shaving.
Oh, I was like, what's happening there? Because I was like, is that some makeup?
This is, I don't know if you saw it.
This is My Big Story, and I'm Christopher Swan. I'm on my way to meet Mandi Camille Hauwert. She's a correctional officer over at San Quentin Prison in California. So that alone is interesting, but something that stands out largely in her story, she's transgender, and she transitioned while working at the prison. So whoever Mandi is, I know one thing about her already. She has to be really brave. So Mandi's been sharing her story for a little while now. I heard about Mandi through an interview she did on the Death, Sex, and Money podcast. It was a great story, and they talked about her transition and some of her backstory. But then I heard the host mention that Mandi is from my town, my small little town, Petaluma, California. I was a little surprised to find that this woman is bravely sharing her story and making a big change in the world from a small community, not from a big city. And in my community, and I hadn't even heard her story. So I was super interested. I sent Mandi an email and I said, I need to talk to you. Are you interested? And she said yes. So I'm on my way across town now to meet her and to find out more about her story. I want to know how she's advocating for the LGBT community, specifically the trans community, and I want to know what life looks for her now after sharing her story publicly. So let's go meet her. When you first started to transition at work,
Yeah.
how accepting were colleagues or even the prisoners?
When I first came out,
Mm-hmm.
well, when I first came out, I don't think anybody was accepting. I had a few allies right off the bat. Even before I came out, I had come out to a few officers prior to being outed, and so I had very few friendly individuals. And I've told this story before in a few places, but I was working in H unit, which is a dorm setting. It's 100 bunk beds, 200 inmates, right?
Yeah.
Two per bunk. 2 officers sitting in this room, no bars.
Wow.
It's just 2 officers sitting at a desk, and on either side you have 100 inmates on your left, 100 inmates on your right, and it's just the 2 of you. And it was I worked the night shift, and I went in there. It was the first time I had been inside in front of a bunch of inmates dressed in working as a woman, makeup, the cute little tie that I have, which I love. I wear it every day. Most females don't.
Oh, really?
No, they don't. They wear the male tie. I'm like, never. I'm never putting on a male tie ever again, unless my boyfriend asks me, but then I might do it. But
that's a good reason.
Yeah. And, I'm sitting there and the inmates are kind of getting noisy. They're kind of yelling profanities at me, and my partner's looking worried. And we call my supervisor and say, hey, I don't know if it's safe for me to be in here. It's not safe for me, and it's not safe for my partner. Something might happen. I don't want to cause a riot. And then all of a sudden, an inmate comes out from the bunks, walks up to my desk and goes, hey, Officer Howard, I just want to let you know I'm very proud of you. He goes, you're very brave. And he walks away. He had mentioned that when I talked to him later that, he remembered me from before I transitioned, that I was always really nice to him and really fair. And it turned out he was a shot caller inside the dorms. And so within 5 minutes of him going back to his bunk, the room just started to quiet down, and I didn't have any other issues after that.
Wow.
All I can guess is that he essentially just told people to back off.
What about colleagues? Was it a similar experience where there was somebody you talked about having allies.
Yes.
But besides those allies, how friendly was it with, or understanding or willingness from these colleagues?
Lately, I've been describing my coworkers as being in different categories. There are those who are my allies, of course. There are those who are my allies, but they're not openly my ally. Like at work, they give you like the cold shoulder, but outside of work, they're like, hey, and then there are those who are openly discriminatory towards you. So, and in my case, it was people who felt that it was necessary for them to let me know that I'm going to hell for being an abomination or whatever. There are those willing to openly express homophobic profanities toward me at work. I've been called some horrible, horrible things, either to my face or just around the corner where I'm pretty sure they know I can hear them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always think they don't know I'm around. No, they know I'm around the corner. That's why they're being extra loud. And then there are those who don't vocalize their discomfort or hatred. I don't want to say it's hatred for everybody. A lot of times it's just discomfort. They don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And so their behavior is adversarial towards you. It's confrontational. Or the other side of that is they just ignore you, right? Like you walk into a room and everybody gets quiet.
You mentioned earlier that you want to stay because you haven't changed things yet.
Yeah.
Is that 100% true? Or have you seen some things change? Like we just talked about, like,
Yeah.
okay, so your feet aren't on fire.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that is just you're not seeing as much of the, the pushback or bias, or you're actually seeing some small changes of positivity happening, like there's effect you're having.
Yeah, I feel like when I say there hasn't been any change in it, there sort of has, is that I don't feel like the kind of change that I'm looking for has happened yet. And I don't even really know
what that
I'm looking
is
for. Yeah. It's one of those things where you'll know when you see it. You'll know when it's happened. And I've had many small victories that have felt great, but also have felt like I can do more.
Is there one of those small victories that you can remember that you can maybe describe?
Well, having one of the small victories, like I said, is being a trans person inside the prison, interacting with officers, and whether they like it or not, they're getting to know a trans person. They're getting to know what it's like to be trans, because I talk to everybody. I've gotten in trouble for it, for talking to everybody, because when I say everybody, I mean everybody. I don't mean just officers. I mean inmates and their families. And I will talk about being trans. I don't view that as being personal. I view that as I'm openly trans. Everybody knows I am. I'm just educating. I'm an educator. And a few of the small victories are just kind of interacting with people who were super uncomfortable with you beforehand, and now they're not. And one great example was I worked with a group of 3 female nurses inside our infirmary. It was a night shift. And we're just sitting there, and there's a few inmates on our floor. They were doing what they call suicide watches and stuff like that. Make sure the inmates don't hurt themselves. And they were all just kind of like not talking to me for the first few hours. And then one of them started to converse with me a little bit. And then the inevitable happens. They go, I don't mean to be offensive, but, and then they have a question, when did you first feel like you were a woman? Or sometimes they get really personal right away. Did you have your surgery? And I go, what surgery? Like a nose job? Like which one are you talking about? I've had many surgeries. I had a surgery when I was a baby. So, and by the end of the night, what had happened is, and I'm glad they expressed it to me, because it doesn't often happen, is they expressed it. They came to working with me at the beginning of the shift, and they were very hesitant with the idea of me using the same restroom as they were using, and even just conversing with me and like, what would I be like? And they thought, maybe I'm a pervert and I just like wearing women's clothing. By the end of the night, they were all like my besties. And to me, that's a small victory. I converted 3 women from being homophobic and transphobic and to being supporters and allies and friends, and I still hang out and chat with them today. So
I can see where you would, that's definitely a victory.
Yeah.
And I can see where in the scheme of things, even if you're not positive of what the big changes you want to make, I can allude to thinking what those are. But this may, compared to that, seem like a small victory. When I hear it, Mandi, I think of that as a big victory, actually.
Yeah.
Like you've changed 3 minds. And I know in that, like that scheme of things, it may seem small, but that's 3 people that will now think differently and may have a conversation about it with others. So I'm glad that you do see that as a victory, but I also hope that you'll also realize these small pieces come together, right?
Yeah.
And you are affecting change in a bigger way. I want to bring up something else that you just mentioned for a moment.
Okay.
And this is going back to your younger years, when you first discovered or started to understand your gender identity.
Yeah.
For you, when learning about that and understanding how that was really working or what that really meant, being transgendered or something different, was that like a click moment for you, or was it something else?
Are you meaning that it clicked that I was trans or that I was different?
Yeah, that it was like you finally had a name for something, or you understood something, or what did it mean when you started to learn about transgender for you at that time in your life?
Yeah, I didn't really even hear the term transgender and or associate it with myself until college. But prior to that, I had heard trans, tranny, transvestite, he, she, male. I saw all the girls going up on Jerry Springer, which one's a girl, which one's a boy. Those were my role models growing up, right? So, and as a child, I knew I was different, but I didn't have an explanation. I didn't have a way to express how I was different. And it wasn't until I got into college and I saw the trans panel, the LGBT panel, but also I took abnormal psych, and then I saw this term gender identity disorder. And even then, it was like, yes, but not quite, right? Like, and then I hear the LGBT panel, and this woman gets up and she talks about being transgender and explains her personal story. In abnormal psych, it was all, it's psychology, it's clinical,
Sure.
right? It fit,
it's clinical. It's a textbook.
It fit, but not quite. And then this girl gets up and she tells her story, and I'm like, this is my story. This is me. This is how I felt since I was little. This explains so much. And then I realize I'm transgender. Like it was in that moment that I kind of, at least internally, I didn't say it out loud. Sure. I didn't go, oh my gosh. I'm like, just internally.
How did that feel? Was it a relief?
No, it was frightening because I saw what people did to trans people. I saw the way that they were treated. I saw the way that people spoke about them. I spoke about them that way on occasion, but just to try to fit in, to make sure that nobody knew what I was, that if they knew, they would hurt me, or they would, at the very least shun me. And I did not want to be part of the community. I did not want to be LGBT. I did not want to be queer. I did not want to be a laughingstock or a sideshow like I saw on TV. I didn't want to be, material fodder for other people's hatred. And so when I realized what I was, it just kind of, it threw me off completely. And I ended up shortly thereafter joining the military and trying to run away from everything.
How long, or no, let me ask something different. How frightening was it? Because you mentioned earlier at one point too, there was like suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, that's dark. That's a really dark place to be in.
It is.
Was it that dark for you for a while?
It's been that dark for me for a long, long time. In fact, something that nobody's chosen to talk about yet is the fact that I had a suicide attempt in December. Not even a year ago, last December. And I even had, consoled in somebody at work, and it got reported, and they sent people from San Quentin, called the Marin County Sheriffs to take me to the hospital on a 5150. I did not get taken. I convinced them that I was okay. I wasn't okay, but that's besides the point. I was okay enough to go home. And so for me, it's not that things were dark and they're better now. They are better. There are so many things in my life that are better, but currently I'm in such a dark place that it kind of almost doesn't matter. The impact of the great things in my life are overshadowed by all the horrible things that are still happening to me. And one of the reasons I'm pushing so hard currently in doing my activism and getting out there is I'm just trying to fill my life with more brightness, more light, more positivity. And it's one of the reasons that I strongly, strongly, strongly want to find an avenue for myself to get out of there.
Do you have others in your life that are surrounded you that are like light and joy and help support you?
No, I have many, many friends. I wish we could all get together more and more often. Not all of them live in the area, or they live like an hour away. Some live 4 hours away. But there are plenty of people in my life who come in and out, right? They come and go. Sure. And so long as I know they're there, that does help. But last December, everything that was going on in my life, it just kind of culminated into that situation. And I always tell people it's not one thing that pushes you over the edge; it's everything, right? It's and if you don't find an outlet, if you don't find a way of dealing with it, then something like that happens. And you know, there are people we see in our lives, like people like Robin Williams, who we go there. It doesn't make sense, but that it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be rational. It doesn't have to be logical. My therapist afterwards and since then has been angry at me because she thinks I'm too smart and too intelligent to do something stupid like that. Mm-hmm. But for me, I don't think it has anything to do with intelligence or how smart or how logical you are. It doesn't matter, because when you get to that place, everything else just falls away. You don't care about what it's going to do to anybody, because it will affect the people around you in profound and horrible ways. It's never a good thing, suicide, but when you're in that space, it doesn't matter.
You don't see anything else.
Mm-mm. I had my gender reassignment surgery in 2015. It didn't magically fix me. Mm-hmm. Am I much happier than I was? Absolutely. My body image is 10 times better than it was, but that doesn't fix the way people treat me at work. Sure. It doesn't fix the fact that I work in an environment where correctional officers have one of the highest suicide rates of law enforcement.
Yeah, because
that's just a normal correctional
just
officer.
Looking at that job, it's a stressful environment.
It is, yeah.
You mentioned in the very beginning of our conversation too about, you know, trying to leave that space at one point, you know, correctional officer work. We've talked about you writing as well, right?
Yes.
Even before we had this conversation, that you write a lot, and now that's turned into activism. And what I've been really wondering too is, do these worlds intersect, or do you see them as like a separate path?
I don't necessarily see them as separate. I could, were I willing to put in the amount of time and energy it would require, I could do them both. There's no reason I have to quit San Quentin to do the writing. There are plenty of really well-known writers that I know of who held full-time jobs while they were penning their novels or their books. And because everyone has this idea that to do these things, you have to just let everything else go and be a writer 100% of the time, which is not necessarily true. It'd be great if you could do that, right? If you could support yourself and do that, that's awesome.
Somebody who listens to this wants to come by and give you a sponsorship for something.
But there are a couple of other avenues and paths that are related to my work as a trans correctional officer that I'm currently looking into and seeking out. One of them is a suggestion that was made to me last year around Pride. We were involved in being part of a docu-series, and they filmed a bunch of stuff for 5 days with us. They came to Pride with us, and we did all these things, and I was the point of contact for everybody, from the producers through all the cast members. And afterwards, you know, it didn't happen. You know, it kind of fell away after that. But during that whole process, they said one of the producers thinks that I should get into producing and or consulting when it comes to working with TV studios and stuff like that as a trans, especially if it's anything related to prisons or anything, you know, within my boathouse, because she thought I was pretty good at it. And so that's I don't know if that's a possibility, but it doesn't hurt to look into it. It doesn't hurt to try. The worst that's going to happen is it doesn't happen.
Sure. Right?
You're not going to hurt yourself by doing it. The other part of that is working with either nonprofit groups and or government agencies to actually go inside prisons and police districts and stuff like that, and actually stand in front of cops and stand in front of correctional officers here in California and elsewhere and tell them my story and share with them, hey, this is what's going on. Because what happens is you get all these officers are being forced into sensitivity training, right? And you should hear the way officers complain and moan and oh my God, we're going to hear about this again. We're going to hear about sexism. We're going to hear about how to treat women. I know how to treat a woman, right? You know, she makes me my dinner, right? And so they just hate it. They absolutely hate it. And they absolutely hate the idea of having somebody who's never what we call walk the tier. You've never walked the walk. You've never walked among a bunch of inmates. You've never had to rush in a cell and take somebody down. You've never been shot at. You've never had horrible liquids thrown on you. You've never been almost stabbed. You've never had to shoot somebody. And you're going to put a person who's never done any of that, and they're going to stand up there and tell all these officers how to treat a trans person or how to do this, how to do that, and it just doesn't work. They don't take you seriously. But if you stand somebody like me in front of a group like that, they can't make that excuse anymore.
It's a great way, again, of you like speaking truth and using your story, right, to create change in a related way, but a unique way. That's a great way to maybe possibly intersect that.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I definitely want to kind of start pursuing and looking into. How do I even approach it? How do I even come to an organization and say, hey, here's an idea that I can offer you? And I've even offered something similar to my own department, and I even said, they need to make this happen. Even if you don't use me, get somebody. There are other trans officers in our department, not at San Quentin, but there are others in our department. Heck, grab the trans officers in San Francisco at the SFPD, have them come into the prison and talk to people. Like, even if you don't want me to do it, that's fine. Something needs to happen. Right?
Mandi, I hear you talk this whole time, and just based on that, and even the stuff I've seen, it sounds like you are so ready to explore possibilities. It's not that you want to, you're so immediate to jump ship. It's more about you see possibilities in a lot of things, and to way to utilize your story and voice for positive change. And it's just, you can kind of see your eyes light up a little bit when you talk about like, oh, and I could try this, or I could try this. And it sounds like whatever you end up doing, it may evolve, and you have so many things that you can try to help.
Well, I was on a radio show just a few days ago, locally, KRCB, on Outbeat Radio. And one of the things they asked me was if I had advice for anybody ending my interview. And I told them they just need to, I had some other longer story, but the gist of it is they got to keep putting a foot forward. Even if it's a centimeter forward, an inch forward, as long as you're putting a foot forward, you're eventually going to get to where you need to be. Doesn't mean you're going to get to where you want to be. I may never do any of these things I'm hoping on doing, but so long as I keep pushing forward, I'll find somewhere to be. I'll end up where I need to be, where I'm needed, right? And for me, that's the most important thing. I was joking about it for a little while, but now I really want to actively pursue this, and it'll be great if I can help be a part of making it happen. And I want, by next year, or maybe even the year after that, assuming I'm still with the department, I want to see CDCR make rainbow patches for Pride, and authorize people who want to wear them. San Francisco, the PD there does that already. They have rainbow patches. And it's just something, I don't know what it would mean to accomplish that, really, but it would mean, at least for me, that some sort of progress has been made. You've gotten this big organization to acknowledge something that they're not acknowledging right now, that they're putting in their rule books, they're making policies and making it illegal to harass people like me, but they're not doing anything. They're just following laws. They're not being active members of any community.
They're not even showing, as they say, their heart on their sleeve.
No.
Like, where's the passion? It's not just the
Where's
law.
the passion? I've said this for a few years, and it still hasn't happened, but I keep bringing it up. Is they need to show up at the trans job fair in San Francisco, where businesses come and they set up a booth and they go, hey, here we are, this is what we do, we want to look at hiring trans people. I think SFPD has a booth there. How amazing would it be to see CDCR with a booth there? Not a lot of people will probably want to work in a prison, but there might be a couple. And even if they don't get anybody, just showing up, just being part of that community, being an active member, not just enforcing laws, is showing you showing the community that they're out there, that they're improving, that they're trying.
And I would also think it would mean something personally for you.
It would,
like that's the big change that you're maybe thinking. Like
Something,
those things would signal that
those would be huge.
Real change has happened. Yeah. Over the last couple of years, especially the last 2 years, but even prior to that, you've been sharing your story quite a bit online in different ways. I'm curious about why specifically you're sharing it, because not everybody would do that. It's personal, your story. I'm wondering, is it the same reason that you're still at the prison?
I would say it's related to, and there's definitely a part that's a part of me that wants to be a little egotistical and just kind of share and say, hey, what do you think? And get feedback, because I love feedback, right? Yeah, everybody loves to know that they're doing a good job. Everybody loves to know that they're interesting and unique and loved and special and all that. But beyond that, for me, it's related directly to why I'm still at San Quentin. It's just simply, I think that one of the things that the transgender community specifically suffers from is the fact that a lot of us transition and we disappear. So there are no...
Would you tell me more about that? What do you mean by disappear exactly?
I mean, a lot of transgender individuals, men, women, and non-binary folks, they transition, they go from one aspect of expression to another and of expression and the way they're living, and then they just kind of fade into the background of society. They don't want to be openly trans. They just want to be left alone. They want, and a lot of the reasons for that is safety. So if I was in Texas, I don't know if I'd be as open in Texas. I'm lucky to live in Northern California right now. But a lot of people, they just kind of, they go stealth, right? We call it going stealth, where nobody knows you're trans. The thing that perplexes me again and again and again is I get asked from people, they go, so when you meet somebody, do you tell them you're trans? And I'm like, you're kidding, right? I'm like, I'm 6 foot with a 24-inch shoulder span. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they know I'm trans. But not everybody does. Some people thought I was just like Norwegian or Scandinavian or something. Like, I'm really tall and big. Like, that's not abnormal, I guess, but it's not average either. And there are advantages to disappearing. There are advantages to going stealth. But the problem is, whereas the gay and lesbian community, they're out and they're out. They don't come out and then go back in the closet. Trans people come out and then we go back into another closet. And that creates a lack of community. It creates a lack of opportunities for other trans people to look for mentors, to look for people to look up to. And for me, partly because of my situation where I don't feel that I'm at a place where I could go stealth, and I don't know if I would ever want to, even if I could. Maybe I would, I don't know. But regardless, I feel that me being out, my friends being out, especially the ones who could disappear if they wanted to, they're even braver for being out because they're out there because they have that feeling of wanting the community to have a community, actually building one, right? So when I first transitioned over 5 years ago, or started transitioning even before I came out at San Quentin, I found out that there was no trans community. They always said that there is no trans community because nobody gets together. They, like I said, they come out and they disappear. And so partly for me is I want to be part. And again, it's me building a legacy for myself, building a purpose into my life, because otherwise there is no inherent purpose to whatever I'm doing. So I can build my own. And part of that is helping to build a community and being part of it. When I was in school, in high school, I loved drama. I was in drama. I lettered in drama. And they always wanted to put me out on stage because, drama classes in high schools, there's not a lot of people. So everybody gets up on stage. Like, I didn't want to do it. And they kept putting me in lead roles. And they kept putting me as like the love interest to the girls. And I'm like, I hate this. And all I wanted to do, I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be a part of creating that magic, but I didn't want to be on the stage. I'm always willing to go up on stage. That's why I'm doing these interviews. That's why I'm going on TV. That's why I go and speak in front of crowds, because I'm willing to go on stage. But I don't care if I'm on stage or if I'm backstage. I just want to be a part of the process. I want to be a part of creating that magic, creating that community. And for me, that's what it's all about.
A big thank you to Mandi for her willingness to share her story with me and for her honesty. I believe the more of us that live our truth out loud and in the open, the more we'll realize how we all belong. In this episode, we shared a conversation about suicide. If you're thinking about suicide, or worried about a friend or a loved one, or you need support, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Or if you're in the US and want to text with someone who can help, text 741-741 from anywhere in the US, and you'll text with a trained crisis counselor at the crisis text line. If you want to see more about the interview, including a few pictures Mandi and I snapped and a few extras I've included, check out the episode on mybigstory.show. You'll also find more about my adventures on Instagram and Twitter at @MeChristopher and on Facebook at @TheChristopherSwan. So if you're as curious as I am and you want a fresh batch of smart ideas, meaningful stories, and awesome creativity, then you should sign up for my weekly newsletter at ChristopherSwan.info. And if you love this show, especially season 2, go tell everyone about it and give me a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you do any of those, shoot me a note on the socials and I'll send you some love. Now, if you've made it this far, thank you for coming along with me and welcome to season 2. I'll see you on the next adventure. I'm Christopher Swan, and this is my big story.